Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Sandra Jennings from Blue Pool Network, and I'm with my wonderful friend and colleague, Jade of Jade Brown Wellness. Um, I am Hello everybody. My name is Sandra Jennings from Blue Pool Network, and I am here with my beautiful friend and colleague and collaborator, Jade Brown of Jade Brown Wellness. Who is also a wonderful part of Blue Paw. She's been the person responsible over the last few months for all of our social media and also all of our emails that have been going out. She's been wonderful, and we've realised that we have a real alignment in the way that we've been looking at the way that we look at wellness and the way that we look at our embodiment. So welcome to our chat today, and welcome, Jade.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome everyone. And yeah, we're looking forward to having just a chat. And I think going on from last time, I did speak to people, had discussion. I spoke a bit about my journey, but today I think we're gonna both touch on our journey and yeah, see what flows from that.
Mm.
Yeah.
We've just been having a really interesting conversation about how, regardless of where you are on your journey, there's always the next phase of unfoldment. And sometimes we can become a little bit complacent, is the wrong word. It's almost like as we're stepping through our empowerment, um, we can go into a level of autopilot in that next phase, and so we have to listen a bit harder as the signals from our body start to come up. So
Oh,
um
I was like saying our tolerance gets higher.
tolerance gets higher,
So I've
exactly. Yeah.
experienced.
And so we've both been experiencing something over the last few weeks, where we have both had something coming up, in very different ways for each of us, but the core information is still the same. So we'll come back to that shortly. But first of all, just to give you a bit of a background about who we are. If you haven't been with us before, you haven't come across Blue Paw before, and you haven't come across either Jade or I. So, as I said, my name is Sandra. I am the founder of Blue Paw Network, and Blue Paw Network is um, it's basically a place for beautiful souls to come together. We have in-person events and also online, and it's really for anybody who is on their journey of transformation, stepping into more authentic alignment to who they are. And um, it's we had an event yesterday where there were so many beautiful souls when we all come together in one space as a beautiful community and family. um, the energy in the room is phenomenal, and we are going through such a huge transition of consciousness right now, and the pull and the urge for us to come together is becoming greater because we need to shine our light. And the more that we come together, it's not just one on one is two, it's amplified exponentially. And so when we come together in these spaces, the light that we're actually shining and the way that we're able to show up in our authenticity and hold space for each other is just so beautiful. So Blue Paw found, in its very core, is all about that foundation of community connectivity, and the transformation of consciousness. And there is a whole story behind Blue Paw, but I'm not going to touch on that today. We'll come back to that another time.
Mm.
But in terms of my journey, the way that I work now, I work with assisting people to really step into the more of their alignment of their truth. And this is why Jade and I align so well, because we both come to this in slightly different ways. But for both of us, the most important thing is to listen to ourselves and clear those distortions, whether that's from a mental perspective, whether it's how we're showing up in the world, whether that's how we're living our lives from a well-being perspective, those things that are masking the truth of who we are, which are magnificent, incredible, beautiful beings of light who are here in this space. But we so often dim our light, and that's just because of our programming. And
Mm.
so it's where we are now is to actually shift and clear that programming. And this started for me where, I guess when I was a kid, I actually went to a convent for 13 years. And so, of course, there's so much indoctrination around who you should be, so much Catholic guilt, so much of all of that. You should do this and you shouldn't do this, and this is how women should be, and this is what you should be thinking. So much guilt and shame that you're getting from such a young age. And of course that then attracts toxic relationships and a lot of negative self-talk and just a lack of self-worth and identity. And it took me probably till I guess it was my early 30s, I had a real breakdown, and I had 2 years where I barely left the house. I was having panic attacks and all sorts of really horrible things that were happening, and I didn't know how to shift from that, and tried all the sort of mainstream things like I was on antidepressants and going to sort of counselling, group counselling, one-to-one counselling, but none of the conventional ways worked for me because it didn't make sense. I couldn't understand it and make sense of it. It wasn't making me feel any better until I was having so much loud, intrusive thoughts that I decided to try hypnotherapy, and had 6 sessions of hypnotherapy, and everything shifted. And that was a real eye-opener for me. And it wasn't really the start of my spiritual journey as such. There have been things that had happened when I was a child, which were sort of, I used to see things and whatever, but I shut it all down. I saw my grandparents in my bedroom when I was sort of 12 who passed, and but I sort of shut that down. But it really started to make me think about that there was a different way of thinking, a different way to approach things, and understanding about the subconscious mind. But it was a couple of years later when I became very close to a lady called Penny, who was a very large part of my journey for quite a long time, and is a very dear, close friend. And we sort of discovered this together. And I went along for some Reiki. I didn't even know what Reiki was at the time. And it was a lady called Lorraine Alder who lived fairly locally to us, and didn't really know what I was stepping into, but she was also a very sort of talented psychic medium. So I had the Reiki session, and she started to talk about all of these perspectives. And although I went to a convent, I'd created my own set of beliefs. And the odd thing was that I didn't not believe in God. I did believe in a higher power, but I didn't believe it as it was taught in that sort of mainstream environment. And then she started to talk about her perspectives that I'd never read or spoken to anybody about. And I was thinking, this is what I believe. This is what I feel.
Made sense.
It just made sense.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, she recommended some I think it was Doreen Virtue's healing cards that I went and bought, and a book that she recommended, which was Diana Cooper, and I think it was that's when I connected with the angels. Something, it was something that sort of more entry level stuff where you're sort of looking at the just looking for something that is giving you some information to start to sort of dip your toe in the water. And I was reading all of these different things and thinking, this makes so much sense. I've never actually been able to make sense of my reality before. And that for me was what was the start of everything shifting.
And that should be always the feeling that keeps you going when you say yes. It sounds like you were really guided. You had that intuition always there guiding you onto that thing to say yes. So would you say there wasn't too much resistance in the way of saying yes to these things and trying hypnotherapy and trying that? Is it quite easy for you to kind of just show up and feel lit up by these new things that resonated with you?
Totally, because I think looking back, it's interesting, and I think anybody that's listening may actually resonate with this, and Jade, you may resonate with this. Until you suddenly discover this, that always feels like there's just something missing, but you don't really know what it is, and you haven't even identified that there is something missing because you don't know what you don't know. And all of a sudden, when this part of my life started to open up, it was like suddenly I felt whole.
Suddenly you could see everything in colour. I always like to say that. It's before, if you look back, everything felt grey to me. And I used to say every year would feel exactly the same. It felt exactly the same. That felt like there was no movement. And I feel like these feelings is why we should always listen and tune into that, because that's always guiding us. Any sense that we have, any feeling, that's always our intuition. It's always our higher self source coming through and being like, there's something more, there's something that you can, you know, should be doing, and that's on your path. So it's always so guiding for us to listen to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, completely agree. And it's interesting to look back and observe the journey up until that point, which had been hard. And I have to say that even from that point, once I started to open up, that becomes a different sort of a journey. But although
Definitely.
everything has to sort of unravel in order for you to find out who you are, because if you're in the wrong relationships that aren't aligned, or if you're in the wrong job, or if you're in the wrong, you're living in the wrong place, or you're whatever it is that you're doing that isn't in alignment, suddenly starts to become glaringly obvious and very hard
Comes
to
a
ignore.
block, doesn't it, to
Yeah.
then your next
Mm.
stage of being your truest, happiest self. And yet you can't ignore it. And again, that's a feeling when you feel like there's this thing that's just in the way and it's not right. And to me, there was always a patience in that. For me, my living situation was such a clear thing that was such a block to me. And I suppose I'll talk about a bit about my journey, but just on this point, because I was living with my nan for quite a long period of time in an awful environment. It was not a loving home. It was very restrictive. I couldn't do anything. I pretty much just hid in my room. My step granddad did not want me there at all. He was not very nice to me. And it always felt like it was such a block end, but me and my partner were saving up for a house. So I didn't want to go and rent. I rented when I left home when I was younger, but this was the stage where I was like, I know there's a purpose, and it led me to this house. It was that time of patience and in that space, knowing this is not the circumstance that's going to be here forever, but it's okay. And because I'm always still striving, I'm always still listening and trusting that my home is there. And that was a really guiding thing, and a lesson to learn in that as well. I got to learn how to be grateful for what I had, because I'd lived most of my life in this victim mode of always looking why my life was terrible. Even my brother pointed out I always had that mentality of the grass was always greener, that I would never be happy until. And so that was a real lesson in and that's the thing. I had help at that point. It was when I met energy healers, and I had people in my journey that was really prominent to that, and I could really drop into being like, oh, it's coming, it's okay. What in this space can I evolve into and drop into and be grateful for? And so grateful for that time. It taught me a lot. Yeah.
I think those early stages completely shift your perspective, and there is so much to unfold and learn. That is the sort of deprogramming of what we thought reality was, who we thought we were, how we show up in the world, the versions of us, the masks we wear to keep ourselves safe. And it's when you start in that through that process and you start going through that unfoldment and you start to observe your thoughts, you start to observe the way that you respond to things, you realize that the version of yourself that's actually been living the first, for me, probably what was like 30 or 35 years, wasn't actually me at all. I was a product of, I'd created versions of myself to fit in with certain people's expectations and to fit in with my own idealistic version of who I thought I should be.
Mm.
And none of that was actually in alignment with who I really was. So it's hardly surprising that that's completely unsustainable. And I can completely see why, if you don't come to that realization, you can live your entire life feeling numb to everything and having to block everything out because,
That's into stress.
yeah, and just adapting to stress and coping. It's that
Yeah.
literally learning to cope with your environment,
Yeah.
rather
Which is
than,
dangerous, isn't it? Because then you can learn to cope so well that you
mm,
don't realize you create your own prison that
mm,
you're in.
mm.
Yeah. And
We
you're just,
almost create ourselves a gilded cage. I had a conversation
yeah.
with somebody a few weeks ago actually about this, in that it doesn't matter what you do in your environment to create um, everything around you being as perfect as it can be. If you haven't changed it within yourself, you're like effectively like the beautiful bird that's inside a golden cage of its own making. And
Mm.
so you've got the whole world that you could have be exploring outside of you, but you've got these these invisible bars, and the bars are there, but they're only there because you've put them there. And you just don't realize that all you need to do is open the door and you can fly free. But until you have that realization, you're stuck within that space. And it doesn't matter how wonderful, you can move to the most magnificent house, you could be on the beach in the most amazing place, but you can still be thoroughly unhappy because you haven't stepped out of that cage. You need to create that freedom within you.
Yeah, and that's what we've just been talking about before we jumped on, wasn't it? About how we can create that in different stages of our journey, and then only suddenly realize when it kind of smacks us in the face, like it has happened to me recently, is because I've created such a tolerance in my life now, where I've built this ability to cope so much because I'm so good at regulating. I'm so good at all the things that I do, and I realized I'd been ignoring a lot of things, and it was boundaries for me, how I haven't actually been honoring what that looks like to me, and my needs and my time and my body. And it's only because I was saying to you, when I was going through the anxiety, when I set boundaries, they seemed so powerful at the time, but they were so necessary, because otherwise I'd be having a panic attack. I couldn't go to that thing, or my body was in a state of shutdown. I was getting really ill, so I had to. But when we start healing, we start to then drop those. Yeah, which is what has happened to me recently, I've realized. So I need to put those things back in place, and just listen and come back into that place of however I'm feeling, and passive aggressiveness is a big thing that comes up for me if I know I'm ignoring what I actually want and what I need, what my boundaries are. We don't actually say it, but underneath, if we're slightly resenting someone or something, that's a real sign.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it completely is. And I think it may be something that quite a few people are resonating with right now, because we are going through, I mean, we've been going through since the beginning of this year, enormous shifts and letting go of a lot more of our uh, the traumas that we've been holding on a cellular level, all of those different things, whether it's from this lifetime or past lifetimes. We've been letting go of this bit by bit. And as more light is coming in, the more this is intensifying with the energies that are bringing that up. And for each of us, it's showing up in different ways. And a number of people I'm speaking to right now have been finding specifically this last month or two really challenging, because it feels that we've created ways of coping, even if we've been on this path for some time, as Jade and I were just been talking about. You learn your strategies to actually observe yourself, notice when things are out of alignment. But especially when you become quite passionate about something, and I've found that I've done this with Blue Paul, where I've been so passionate about wanting to drive it forwards and wanting to support people on their journeys, that I've noticed this real martyrdom within me of like, I can cope, I can do anything, I've got endless energy and endless reserves. Of course I haven't. And if we don't look after ourselves, we can't actually give what we need to. So it really came up for me in terms of a real I was starting to feel resentful about the amount of work I'd created for myself, and out of feeling that I should be doing this and should be giving more and I should be helping more and supporting more. But the one person I wasn't supporting was myself. And so eventually it's totally unsustainable. And if you're not listening, the universe will come up and will actually reflect back to you. And we were talking about the ways earlier, we were talking about the ways that can happen. And that can happen with certain clients that you have that will be coming to you. If you're a therapist or a healer, you'll have certain clients who will be mirroring back to you what it is that you need to be seeing within yourself. And for me, I knew that I was just totally exhausted. I knew that I was on the verge of burnout, because I just was, when you just got no energy reserves left, you're just you're just getting up every morning, dragging yourself through the day. And just before we went on holiday, we ran a well-being well-being fair, and I was so desperate to go the next day on holiday and just have that rest. But of course, what would have happened if I'd have just gone away, had the rest, and come home, was I just would have carried on in a similar sort of vein, because the universe knew I wasn't really properly listening. I was just thinking, I need a holiday, I'll come back, I'll be fine. So instead, as some of you who already know, I had a bit of an accident on holiday, which sort of stopped me in my tracks. but it made me really pause and think, okay, so why has this happened? What is it showing me? So this is deeper than just me needing a holiday. This is on so many deeper levels than I'm really seeing. And the same as Jade was saying, it's all about boundaries. It was, for me, it was about seeing that I need to really honor and listen to myself more so than I have been, because it's not that I don't listen to myself, I do, but I realized I was doing it almost, you know how you can pick and choose the bits you listen to, and you sort of have a blind spot that you just think, that's okay, I'll come back to that. I'll deal with it later. But it gets louder and louder until you can't ignore it anymore. So it's not that you're not doing all of those things that help you cope before, but as we're evolving more, we need to step into more of ourselves. We need to find there's greater parts of us that are coming up to be seen, and those parts need to be honored as well. So we need to create space for those parts of us to be seen and heard and acknowledged and honored.
Yeah.
Boundaries is definitely a big thing right
And
now.
it's so true what you say there. It's like our passions do actually, it gives us such an energy that can keep us going. But then we are ignoring all the things of our physical body, our needs, like, you know, our time, and our energy, and we do come crashing down. And that's why we live in this world where you always hear people in this kind of business world, we're going to make all this money, and you get up early and you do this, and it's that kind of energy of like, no, we can do this because, you know, we're creating a business and I love to do this. But at the same time, you're not loving yourself, and you're not loving you know, you as a being. And we're all here in this body and here for a reason, more than to make money and more than the other things that are we think we need and think we need to do in success. So and yeah, it only lasts for so long. It only lasts for so long until it does come crashing down. And yeah, I think for me, one that I'll share is I went on a whole journey with my menstrual cycle, and my hormones kept really out of balance. For women, if you're in a big state of stress and in survival mode most of your life, that's going to be a part of your body that reflects that hugely. But I ended up going on that journey and healing, and had a really amazing menstrual cycle. But lately, the universe is on that first day we're meant to rest and listen to our body. I've had something that I felt like I couldn't say no to for the last 6 months, 8 months, and it's just built up and built up and built up to the point where, yeah, recently just a lot of things happened on that day to the point I felt so ill, and I was not in a good place by the end of it. And it was a big wake-up call to be like, no, this is something that you actually teach others and you tell other people to do and you used to do, and now you're ignoring that. So I'm going to honor that a lot more now, and honor my body and honor that time. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is with all of that, so for each of us it will look different in terms of how that's showing up. And when you talk about boundaries, it sounds something that sounds really firm and quite harsh, but it really, it isn't. All it is just saying, I'm going to honor my own intuition and put my needs, and it's not necessarily putting your needs above others, because of course there are times, if you've got a young child, you're going to have to make sure that their needs are met, etc., etc. It's doing it in a way that is incorporating all of the other needs of the other people in your life in a way of holding space for them, but with compassion for yourself, so that you just know that you're honoring what is needed to happen, and you can do that at the same time as honoring the needs of others. Because it's, but quite often we can be in that mindset where we think, we've got to do that because they're going to need that, we've got to do that because they're going to need this. But that's actually our perspective as to what they need, rather than what they actually need in that moment. And if we were to be honoring of our needs and just expressing how we're feeling in that moment, 99 times out of 100 it will be met with, yeah, totally understand that, don't worry, it's fine. But we
Sometimes not though. And that's the thing, and that's what I've realized. I have to be okay with people's reactions, and that's the hard thing. It's knowing that. And the conclusion, I kind of realization I've come to recently is, it's okay if people aren't okay with that.
Yeah.
And I was saying to you earlier, if you're someone who is struggling to set boundaries, it tends to mean that you probably do have a big heart and you are thinking about others and you're giving a lot and you're being really kind. So it doesn't mean that because someone's reaction, it tends to be that people are not used to that. It might be someone that is used to us doing things for them and not setting those boundaries, and so it's a shock to them. Or it's something within them that they need their own boundaries, they need to set that. So yeah, it's been okay, and just being like, that's okay if other people react and then not happy with me setting these boundaries. And I think that's something we have to feel safe with, and I need to feel safe with. And it comes down to just having that conversation with our subconscious, feeling that fear within our body and dropping into that and being okay with that, and having an understanding that we are being kind, we're being kind to ourselves and being kind to others at the same time, even when we are setting boundaries. So yeah,
I think it's such an interesting point, because I think if you're in alignment within your life where the people are around you are loving and supporting you, they may be a little bit sort of like, "Ooh, okay, fine," but it will all be okay. But actually, if I think back at the time when I started to honor my own boundaries, it was met with a huge amount of resistance and anger from people that expected me to be a certain way. And I think it depends on your circumstances as to, and it's going to be individual for everybody as to how that shows up in your life. Because if you're feeling that when you express your needs, it's met with anger, frustration, and you have to shut yourself down, that in its own right is a big question to be asking. Is like, am I in the right relationship? Is this person honoring my needs? Am I having to become a version of myself to keep this person happy? Because then that's a big shift. That's a completely separate, it's a much bigger conversation.
mm,
If we're in an aligned situation where we're with somebody, or not, or whatever the circumstances are, but those people that are around us that care for us, that love us, that actually want to see us flourish and grow, it may be that they might be slightly irritating for them in the moment because it's not quite quite convenient. But generally speaking, they will take it on board and shift and adjust and adapt. But if you're being met with resistance, that's something to really look at in terms of the dynamic of the person, the relationship that you're
Also, like, I think as well, it's our relationship to, say, anger. So for me, I'm just thinking about my brother here, who he would meet that with a bit of anger, and I have such a trauma response to anger. So
Mm,
even if it's he's just being irritated by it, that kind of anger that's arising in him is what then reinforces that boundaries aren't safe. No,
yeah.
it's not safe to express that.
Mm.
So again, and it points back to us, it makes look into us, okay, like it's okay if anger is coming through him, I don't need to shut down. And I think that's what's made my boundaries kind of hazy, because I've seen a few people's reactions, and I've just gone, oh, that's not safe, and it's reinforcing that. It's made me think, am I being too fussy, or am I asking for too much, or is this my problem? And again, it puts you into that mode, and realizing that no, that's not that's not the case. It's just a trauma response that's coming through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the more that where in the last few weeks, I've really been working on this in a slightly different way from Jade, because obviously we're doing this all in for each of us, it shows up differently. So what's showing up for me, obviously I'm a slightly different age bracket to Jade, so it isn't coming up through sort of cycles with me. It's coming up through work and actually just working too hard, and also feeling that people pleasing. It's like wanting to make everybody happy, and so then what you end up with is more work to make somebody happy, rather than actually thinking, is that really in alignment with where we're going to be moving forwards in terms of the core of what you want to create? Or are you just doing something because somebody else asked something, and so you're doing that one odd thing for that one person that becomes actually quite a big thing, and then you end up with all of these sort of rockets going off into different directions that you're trying to manage and juggle, and it gets to the point where you're feeling like there's going to be plates smashing in every direction that you're trying to catch, and that's such an uncomfortable feeling. So for me, it's shown up more from that perspective. Um, and I know that I've had to come on a big journey of being able to express how I feel. because of unsafe relationships, which were unsafe in terms of not being heard, not being seen, and having to be a version of myself which wasn't in alignment with me in any way at all. And so that's why I very much relate to that. Sometimes you have to know whether that's healthy for you, because if you can't have your own expression met with some sort of compromise, then it's very difficult to actually deal with that. And of course, it does feel unsafe, because it means that when you express yourself, somebody is going to shut you down completely, or you have to do something which is going to put you in a place of unsafety, because you have to leave a relationship, leave a job, whatever it is. So it all feels very difficult, and it's very hard. But when you do actually do that, the universe has a way of shifting things so that you're supported in a very different way. Because all the time that you're not living in alignment with the information that's coming into you, and not trusting the intuition that's coming up from your body, or however you're feeling your intuition, if you've got that inner knowing and you're not following it, the universe is going to be giving you all sorts of signs in very difficult ways that you have to eventually listen. I mean, to the extreme where Steve got run over by a London taxi because he wasn't listening to the universe. That's obviously a very extreme version of that. But it shows up in lots of ways in our lives if we don't listen. But the minute we do start to listen, all of a sudden, synchronicities start to show up, and all these amazing things start to happen. So we do feel supported, we feel in flow, and it starts to make us feel, okay, that baby step that I just took, that wasn't so bad, because this happened and that was amazing. Even though I thought that was going to be really terrifying, I did feel supported that something magical happened that I didn't expect. Because it's really interesting how one tiny little shift brings in miraculous changes.
It's a feeling, isn't it? That I was thinking about that lately. Is that feeling when you've shifted in something and you've set that boundary and you're starting to actually feel comfortable with that boundary, for example. There's this lightness, there's this feeling of freedom that you're just, it's that empowerment. That word empowerment just always comes to me, that you've stepped more into, and you have that understanding. And I always think paying attention to that feeling as well, like having a thought about that feeling and holding that will help you get through when you're setting that boundary. For example, when someone gets a bit angry and irritated, think about how good it feels, that empowering feeling, and let that be that fuel to help you and continue with that and being strong.
Absolutely. And there are so many tools that we can use to support us through that, because naturally, if we haven't got the resources, we just go into fight or flight. And so as much as we know that we want to hold those boundaries firm to support ourselves, it's quite difficult to do that if we don't have the tools, the resources at our disposal to be able to use when that happens, because we just go back into the old pattern of what we've already done. So with that in mind, that's one of the reason why we're doing what we're doing is having both of us come from different but quite difficult journeys. And I didn't touch too much on my journey, but there were a lot of difficult situations I touched on. I had difficult relationships where I had to really find, I had no sense of my own identity, didn't know who I was, because I'd given over so much of myself to become the version of myself I thought that would be accepted within that situation. And so because of that, you have to really unpick and keep on listening. I remember when I first started doing this, and I remember, I can't remember specifically, because this obviously is like 25 years ago now, but I remember saying something, and as I said it, I thought, that isn't even what I think. That's what my mum would say. So I realized that I was actually just pressing play on an old recording that's obviously been stuck in my subconscious, that when this happens, this is how you respond, because that's how your parents would have responded to that. And we have all of this in our unconscious programming. And when we start to notice that, you then start to hear it, and then you can start to shift it and change it. So it's
We have
fascinating.
quite a different experience with that, which we spoke about. For me, because I didn't really have any caregivers, I was from this house to this house, this person. I didn't actually have anyone to look up to. I remember as a young age looking at adults being like, I don't respect you, I don't love you, I don't look up to you, because they made me feel so unsafe. And I was quite in tune when I was younger. That's why I used to look after my brother, and I became this mum role to him because I could just sense things. And so I never adapted anyone's beliefs as much. And I see that with my own clients, and as you're saying there, when you look up to them and you have a parent that you're with your entire childhood, teenage year, you literally are that copy of them.
Yeah,
And I
totally.
have that, but what I did have was lots of trauma to work, neglect, feeling alone, like lots of trauma to deal with because of not having anyone that I felt loved by and I was cared for.
Yeah.
So it's different.
Two different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Because I had my mum and dad on a pedestal, so I believed that they were the perfect people because I adored them. I still do. My dad's passed now, but my mum's 94, and I adore them. Um, it doesn't mean to say that everything they did, because of course, no, we've all got our own idiosyncrasies, and they did absolutely the best they could. They were very doting parents, but that still comes from what they were handed down from their parents and their best ways of doing things, and their relationship was different generation. So it was very sort of dominant male character, slightly subservient female character. So you just observe that situation and you take on those traits. And then having the reinforcement of going to a convent where you're told that, it's just completely it's so indoctrinated that as a woman that you are subservient, and also you listen to your elders. Anybody that's older than you knows better than you, and that's it. And also the thing that I really struggled with is I wasn't Catholic, but I was in a Catholic school, so I was called non-Catholic. So I didn't even have an identity. I was just invisible. I spent 13 years at a school that nobody even knew who I was because I wasn't important. So I had so many issues around being invisible, not being heard, not being seen. And of course, as you grow into that, being ashamed of who I was because I wasn't enough. I wasn't good enough because I wasn't a Catholic. I was a non something. I was nothing. And whatever I was didn't exist in their eyes. So it creates a huge amount of trauma that you don't even realize, because that's just what my life was. And actually, on the surface, it was all quite nice. There was nothing particularly traumatic. There were a few little sort of minor things, but in comparison to the scenario that you grew up with, Jade, it was a very idealistic, lovely life.
I
But
know. That's what I always say to the people that I work with. It doesn't, even if your life looked perfect, there is still so much that has affected you now. It looks completely different. That's why we can never equal a bad situation to that was dramatic and really bad, and neglect to your parents and their behavior and how they treated you. You just can't even compare. They have their own.
it's totally different, and which is why anybody, because Steve often talks about this, because for those of you that don't know, Steve had a traumatic brain injury, run over by the London taxi. The story around Blue Paul is linked to that, but I'll come back to that another time. But so many people, because he was in a coma for 8 days and he's subsequently had epilepsy, and there's lots of been things in his life that have been quite traumatic. And when people hear his story, they're really like, oh my goodness, that was so terrible. And it's like, but it's not a competition, because there are lots of people that can actually be more affected by what seemingly are smaller traumas than Steve's big trauma has been. It's much more about how you deal with it, about your connection to your truth, your emotions, your ability to regulate, is going to have the impact on. It's going to massively impact how you deal with those traumas and how it shows up for you. So it's not about the fact that, well, my trauma is not actually that important. So everybody is going to be so different.
Our
And
body is, it doesn't even know the difference, and even our mind, that's all we can visualize and really take ourselves back to trauma and relive it, because we don't know to in real life and not like our body does respond to danger. It depends where we are, where our nervous system state is at, how resilient we are to stress. It could be walk into a shop, someone finds that terrifying. It's really is going into the body and how are things showing up and feeling within. without our mind going, well, that logically, or it's nothing to do with that and how it appears on the outside. It's really how it's feeling and landing within you. Yeah.
Come in with such different sets of ingredients to make us who we are, and some are just naturally more sensitive than others to trauma. And trauma sounds like it's a big word of something really major, but those traumas can be the fact that somebody, when you were 3 years old, just shouted at you, and that's left a lasting imprint. That's altered the course of your life because of how that felt in your body and your sensitivity. Whereas you could have another child who would just be like, yeah. and, and so it's really such an individual thing, and which is why we should never compare ourselves with anybody else along this journey. It's so unique. We're also both perfectly individual and unique, and exactly where we're meant to be. And if you are listening to this and this aligns with you or talks to you in any way, the program that we're in the process of creating is all about finding the way for you, which is going to help you to deal with that within yourself, help you to be empowered to live in tune with your own inner dialogue, your own inner compass, so that you can connect with it, hear it, honor it, and then start to work with it. Because there are so many think we're so brainwashed and indoctrinated, and with this is the best way to do this, and
yeah, of like, this is how this looks, and our mind goes, oh, so that's the result that happens, and I should do that, and it's not having lasting effect, and we're not really getting where we want in an empowered way, that you can go forward feeling so resourced that you can trust this, you can trust your body, you can trust you and your intuition to guide you. Yeah.
The only way we can actually move forward in an empowered way is to listen to what's coming from within us. Now, you need the tools and the resources to help you to regulate when you start to listen and how to do that. But the most important thing is to come home to yourself. And this is what Jade and I, coming at it from slightly different perspectives, Jade has got the most incredible ways of working with empowered wellness within the body, and connecting and listening to how to move in a way that feels comfortable for you, rather than, if you're somebody that really doesn't like going to the gym but you're forcing yourself to do it, don't. If you love to dance, do that instead. It's about honoring what feels right for you, and eating the foods that nourish you and nurture you, rather than this diet which is so restrictive and doesn't make you happy.
It's
And
that feeling, isn't it?
yeah,
Like, because if you're doing a movement that feels really stressful, so you have a PT, or you pay for this really expensive regime, and it's still not feeling good within you, then you're naturally gonna not have that feeling, like I said, that keeps you going. But if you try something and you're tuning in, you go, oh, that feels good, that's going to be your encouragement. It's you fueling yourself to continue and listen and adapt to what that is. And so no one can ever write that as a clear plan for you, give you the ideas. That's what we're all here to inspire each other and help guide each other. But then it's always coming back to, are you listening to how you're responding to these things? Yeah.
exactly. Because if we do this, if we follow something because somebody else is saying this is amazing, this is the best thing in order to calm your anxiety, to lose weight, to feel more confident, if those things that people are telling you to do don't feel aligned with you, it's just another version of another mask you're wearing, because you're doing it in a way that somebody else is telling you how to do it, rather than how it feels aligned with you. So watch this space over the next number of months. We are in the process of creating this now. The way that I work with connecting and working with energy. I work with the angelic realms, the ascended masters, bringing in light codes, and I sing, I bring through artwork, and also just lots of different tools of empowerment to help you to find what connects with you, to really listen to yourself, and honor the messages that that are coming through with you. And yeah, lots to come. And if you want to join us every Thursday at 12:30, we'll be looking at a different topic every week, and we will be back again same time next week, next Thursday, 12:30, for our next episode of our Empowered Wholeness and Wellness program. So
there's just so much we can talk about. isn't
Yeah.
there? There are so many different things. So it's going to be really exciting. It's going to bring a lot through and a lot of amazing conversations. And if anyone does have any questions as well, please feel free to ask us, because we really want to make this interactive and talk to you all. So we're here to ask any questions. And if this is on Facebook or anywhere, you can comment, or if not, get in touch with us in our inboxes anywhere. And yeah, we would love that.
Perfect. Okay. Well, lovely to speak to you, Jade. I will see you soon, and we will look forward to connecting with you this time next week. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.